resume number 3. I kind of zoomed out real quick and was just explaining, like, I really like the layout here. It looks nice and clean. It's easy to see kind of the dates sort of isolated over here. This one quality analyst job, there are multiple dates on here, so we'll talk about how to think about that when I get to that point in the resume. But overall, when I look at this, I think this is going to be easy to read, and that's kind of the impression that you want to give. But I forgot to start a clip, so I started over again. So one of the things that I mentioned on other resume reviews is I like to see that tech skills block first and foremost. So that way, like when I read a resume, the way that I like to see it, again, just my opinion, you don't have to do it this way, but when I read a resume, I want to know, what do you know? How have you practiced it? And where did you learn it? In that order, because that's what I care about. As a hiring manager, I care about what you know. I don't care first and foremost where you went to school. I care about what you know. And then I want to see how you've used those skills. Now, in this case, C-Films actually has software engineer experience. That sort of preempts having project work on here. And so I would probably want to see skills and then work experience and then project work after that if there's a relevant project. But we'll talk about the order to put things in here kind of as we break this down and go through it. Thanks for the follow, Blind by Yako. Feel free to get in on the giveaway as well. Now that you're a follower, you can do ! giveaway. We're going to be doing another drawing here soon. So on the resume here, I would want to see the technical skills first and foremost. The project that you built here, you're calling it projects plural, but then you only give me one project. Again, I would probably put that project a little bit later on the page because you actually have professional technical experience here. And you've also done some data analyst work. That's going to be more prominent as far as like the kinds of technology work that you're going to get into. I would also give yourself a title, like under your name, call yourself like software engineer or software title or software developer or something like that under here. And then you can give me your contact info. You know, give me your LinkedIn portfolio if you've got one, GitHub if you've got one. Ideally, you have a GitHub portfolio. But when I click on your GitHub link, I want to see like all those green dots as well. Like I don't want to just see like 1 or 2 green dots. I want to see like a decent amount of activity on your GitHub profile. That just lets me know that you're constantly committing code. We can talk about that another time. But by putting the technical skills first and foremost, again, you can show high relevance to the job based on the order that you're going to kind of show me these things. So right now you're calling yourself a full stack web developer and you're listing a whole bunch of stuff before you get into the programming languages. And so as much as possible, you want to list your application programming languages before these sort of supporting languages, as I call them, like HTML, CSS, and SQL. MySQL, I would probably list down with other technologies. But you're also telling me JavaScript and PHP again. You're also listing Python way down here. So what I would probably do is I would just group this as languages, frameworks. But again, it depends on what you want to promote. On this resume, you're kind of promoting that you know full stack web development, you know UI UX, including accessibility, professional expertise with MySQL, MySQL and Core SQL. Core SQL is a bit ambiguous. Like, is that just the SQL programming language? But you're also hitting on these keywords multiple times. Like within the skills block, you only need to tell me MySQL once. You only need to tell me SQL once. You only need to tell me these programming languages one time. Now, the fact that you're doing it over and over again for each of these different kinds of roles also kind of gives me the impression that you don't know what kind of role you're going for. Now, this was one of the things that you were asking for feedback is what kind of role am I suited for? Well, you do a lot of things. You do data analytics, you do full stack web development, but I would be building out very separate resumes for each of these. And if you find a data analyst role that you want to apply to, you have a data analyst resume. If you see a programming job that you want to apply to, you have a programmer resume. And then whether that's full stack or back end or front end, whatever, you've got 2 very different resumes because data analysis and web development are 2 different sort of paths in the tech industry. So at this point, I would just say split this into 2 different things. Now, your cfilms.com website is a bit of both because you're doing data analysis of the data that you're putting in that database, but you're also showing that you can build that web development application as well. So you can put that project on both of those resumes, but I would actually split this into 2 different resumes, one for data, one for web. or just general programming. So you've got your data analysis and all the stuff that you know how to do with data analysis, and then you've got the web application one. Now the experience, you always want to put all of the experience in a chronological order. So even if you're applying for a data analyst role, you don't necessarily want to leave these other things off, because according to your resume, you actually haven't done data analysis in almost 3 years. Like, we're coming up on 2023. So if you haven't done data analysis professionally since January 2020, we're going on almost 3 full years that you have not done data analysis. So applying for a data analysis role is going to be a little bit trickier because it's been a while. And if I were looking at your resume and you were to split this out, and I look at a data analysis resume and I see that you haven't actually done it in 3 years, my question is going to be, well, how are you keeping those skills up to date? What have you learned over the last 3 years? How have you practiced that? The fact that you've done some of that in this project is okay, but what kind of data analysis have you been doing? And we've talked a little bit about that offline. I think on a previous stream where we were actually looking through your site and looking at some of the graphs that you were making and so on. But this is a lot more in-depth, like actual analysis of hard data at a company level versus this is my sort of hobby website that I'm building and how I'm doing, like, graphing of data. So the very, very different types of things that you're showing here as far as what that data analysis work actually is. So I would probably try to find a way to make that a little more streamlined, I guess, in that sense, if that makes sense. But definitely split this out into, like, these are the 2 different kinds of projects. Okay, you forgot to mention you're looking for a first role in your submission. Okay, cool. Yep, no problem. I'll note that when we get to your resume. Thanks for sending that in. So that would be the first thing that sort of stands out about this resume is I think this needs to split into 2 resumes. Instead of like, here's everything I know, what am I qualified for? What you want to do when you build a resume is you want to show a company, I am qualified for your job. And so again, kind of coming back to that idea of, like, put lots of data on a resume, bring it back down to 1 page. So for you, because you've got more recent web development experience, I would be listing that first on the resume. So give me your skills, give me your experience, and then any other projects that are relevant that that company is going to care about seeing, I think would be important. Now, in your software engineer role with this design media meta spa, designing front-end web architecture using HTML, CSS, implementing responsive design to make website mobile friendly, and editing videos for YouTube. So editing videos for YouTube is not really like a typical software engineer role. That almost feels more like a social media manager type of role. So it's fine that you're editing videos, but that's not a typical role for a software engineer. Now it is part of your responsibility there, but I would want to see, like, how many videos have you edited? How long does it take you to do them? Like, show me some metrics around some of that. Or I edited these videos for YouTube, averaging 100 views per video, with 20,000 subscribers or something. Like, give me some quantified data around some of that if you feel it's important to mention this to a company. But again, editing videos for YouTube is not a typical part of a software engineer role. I would typically leave that off. You could maybe list that, if they say, what else do you do with that job? You can say, well, I'm also doing social media and doing the YouTube stuff. But these 2 bullet points are really like the main things that you're working for here. The quality analyst, paving seasonal job, which is fine. So you worked at that seasonal job on 2 different occasions, which is okay. It's okay to put 2 different times on here. I would put a space in between the dates here, maybe. It's okay to show that you did that as seasonal work. It's totally appropriate here to show that you did, you were professionally employed, but you probably don't need to give me 4 bullet points about what you did doing asphalt paving. I would give me maybe 1 or 2 bullet points at most, because it's not technical in nature. Unless you're going to apply for a job, for a company who does, some sort of road construction or things like that, where you might be building out an application around, how do we keep track of all the workers? How do we keep track of the different types of jobs that we have to do? Some sort of like construction management type of, software, like a CRM, something along those lines. Then, you might want to talk a little bit more about your involvement in what you did on this job with calculating stats and so on. But generally, what you're doing here, like you're doing data entry and data analysis, generating reports and so on, training new employees on policies and procedures, like that's fine. But again, that's sort of outside of the role of being a quality analyst. So again, I think you need to be a little bit careful about like what you're presenting on the resume, because when I get to these last bullet points on both of these jobs, it's kind of a sort of moment for me, where this other stuff, it's like, okay, this makes sense. Now, in this case, I didn't read all of this before jumping to the conclusion that this was not a technical role. You were actually doing technical work at this role. So this would be fine. But again, maybe limit the number of bullet points. So when we talk about recency on a resume, the first job that you list, like the most recent thing that you have, especially if you're still at that job, you want to give me more bullet points than jobs that you had a long time ago. So in this case, you're doing the reverse. You're giving me 3 bullet points for the most recent job, 4 bullet points for the one before that, and you got 5 bullet points on this one. I would reverse those. Give me 5 bullet points on this first job. Like, what are you doing at this job? This is the most relevant, modern experience that you have. Then give me 4 on this one. Maybe whittle this one down to 3 bullet points if you can. Try to keep as much quantified information on here as possible. But you want to do like more bullet points for a more recent job and fewer bullet points for older jobs, where right now you've got that kind of reversed. Education wise, you've got a lot of certificates and stuff like that. These are fine. I think that these are okay to show. Bachelor of Arts in Math. I would probably put the years, at least for the bachelor's degrees that you've got. Now, if this was like a double major, then you can just list a single graduation date. But if you actually did like back-to-back degrees, then that's fine. But I would probably want to see the dates on here as well. Like, when did you get those degrees? Maybe when did you get these certificates? Because, if you got this, just as an example, just playing devil's advocate here, if you got this web developer certificate like 10 years ago, it's less relevant than if you got it a year ago. It's going to be way more relevant if you got it recently, but I can't know how long ago you got these because you don't give me those dates. So I'd probably put just the year that you got these certifications, what year you graduated with these degrees. Just list the year on there. That's all you need. So skills, then experience. In this case, though, because all of this experience is technical in nature, but 2 of the roles are data analysis and 1 role is software engineering. If you do split this into 2 resumes, what I would probably do is not list this project on the data analysis resume, because you're talking a little bit more in here about like, I imported data into a database and I'm kind of building this stuff out and I'm just pulling stuff out of the database to show on the web page. But you're not really analyzing the data about the movies and the actors like we talked about on the stream the other day, where it's like, how many actors worked with the same actor on the same, with the same producer? Like, how are you actually analyzing that data? What I saw on the website is you're just retrieving that data and saying, here's a list of all the actors that live in Seattle, or here are all the films that were filmed in Seattle. Well, an analysis project would be how many of those actors from Seattle worked on a film in Seattle. That's analysis of that data, where you're actually going in and you're analyzing that data to tell a specific kind of story. So if you build that kind of stuff into that project, then I would put that project on the data analysis resume. Otherwise, this makes for a good project for the web developer resume. So what I would do for the web development one is I would absolutely list this project. I would still list this experience first. So I would do skills, then experience, and then I would list this project and maybe one other project, because if you're building out a web development resume, you're going to reduce a lot of what you're telling me here about what you do as a data analyst, because you're presenting yourself as a web developer who happens to dabble a little bit in data analysis. Your other resume is going to be, I'm a data analyst, I happen to do a little bit of web development as well. But right now, blending all of this into a single resume, people are going to look at this and go, which is it that you want? Do you want to be a web developer or do you want to be a data analyst? You tell me, if I were to look at this and go, okay, well, you're showing me a web development project, your current role is a web developer, but you're giving me a lot more data and bullet points about being a data analyst. And so it's a little bit confusing to the reader. So I would pick one or the other and then kind of split the resume that way. So if you're going to build out a web developer resume, you're probably going to need a second project on here, because if you're reducing this data or this information about these jobs, when we zoom back out on that page, you're going to be losing a third of that page maybe not a third, maybe a quarter of that page, if you're reducing these bullet points to like maybe 2 bullet points for each of those jobs, you're going to need at least one other project on there that talks about the kind of web development experience that you have. And in that case, you probably want something where you're showing more of the fundamentals of being a web developer, like how to log in, how to process form data, how to save form data in a database, retrieve it back, that sort of thing. And so you'll probably want like another project of some kind on a web development resume. My second website project is a stats website. So again, you're kind of muddying the waters here about what do you want to be. You're building a website, but it's doing statistics. So a statistic-based website is more on the data analysis side. And so if you're going to be looking for a job as a data analyst, again, you're going to want a data analyst looking resume that you also happen to be working on this website where you're showing these statistics. But a stats website isn't going to be as applicable to the web development role, because you're still presenting like, hey, I'm a web developer, but I'm actively working on this statistic thing around where I'm doing data analysis. So you're still going to confuse the reader over what is it that you want to be in your career. You want to do data analysis? You want to do web development? That second project that you just mentioned in chat is a bit of both. So you're not helping define which of those things you want to be. Does that make sense? So you need to kind of pick and choose here. Like maybe you need to build out just a web development project where you're doing more of the HTML and the CSS and the design. You're mentioning accessibility and so on. So highlight more of that work. Like what is it about accessibility, like the A11Y and stuff like that you're doing? What specifically around accessibility are you working on? Because you talk a little bit about like the media queries and stuff. If I zoom back in here, you're utilizing media queries for responsive design to be mobile friendly, but you actually don't mention anything in here about accessibility. So like, what are you doing around accessibility? Like, how are you doing this in a way that screen readers are going to be able to sort of work with this better? Or what color schemes are you choosing to help with like color blindness and so on? Like, if accessibility is something that you're putting on a resume, it shows that you care about that. And so you should have some sort of project or work experience that accentuates, this is where I've actually practiced that. Cool. All right. So that was the third resume.